Hey you guys, and welcome to day 3 of Design Fest, and man, this is quite the tonal shift, isn't it? I went from ghosts and decaying corpses to Disney's princess gowns. But it's all in the spirit of the holiday, isn't it? So, like before, we're starting out with Crow. Hey, he's gotta adhere to the theme too, you know. Actually, I could totally see him cross-dressing just for poops and giggles. That is not very outlandish for his character. So these illustrations weren't really too challenging overall. I think Disney princesses were some of the first characters that I really drew. Granted, I was like a toddler armed with nothing more than crayons, but it counts. But for 2 of the illustrations, I did draw those dreaded high heels, just to make sure I had a little bit of a challenge. I should have just done the Disney trick and hide the feet under layers of petticoats. Come to think of it, all 3 of my characters are improperly dressed for the time period. I didn't give them petticoats. Don't look, it's too scandalous. There are bare ankles. YouTube, don't flag this video for near nudity. I think the trickiest part of this drawing was just making sure Crow still had a masculine body. I didn't really want to draw him as a female since that wasn't the theme I was going for, and that's coming up later anyway. And I don't usually draw male characters cross-dressing very often, so it was a bit weird for me. So for him, I referenced Cinderella and Belle to get that sort of classic and simple ball gown. I didn't want to go too over the top with the design since I was trying to emanate that classic Disney look instead of those new and glittery redesigns that they did. I'm thinking I should have done more with the body of the dress just to make sure it was a bit more interesting, maybe added some boning or stitching or something like Aurora has. Anyway, since his main color is red, I decided to put him in a pink gown. I could have done red, but I just like the pink better. And considering his original design's main color was pink, I think it fits. I also toned down the gradient in his hair since I didn't really think that it fit. Most of Disney's designs have a pretty solid color hair, so I only threw in a bit of the blonde just to break up the red tones a bit. I did think of changing his hair color too, but hey, if Ariel can have Hot Topic red hair, I think Crow can too. He just wants to be pretty like everyone else, okay? So just like Cinderella and Belle, I gave him those classic long gloves, and I kept the neckline pretty bare. I just put on a necklace to imitate the collar his normal design has. The heels, again, I kept fairly simple since using the Disney trick you can't even see them anyway, so. I also wanted to break up the skirt just a bit, so I took a bit of inspiration from newer princesses like Merida and Rapunzel, and I threw on a bit of decorative trim. Now I did still want to keep him looking magical, so I did put on a few sparkles, but I kept them pretty minimal since I didn't want to overwhelm the design. After that, I blushed up his face a bit and I moved on to the background. I couldn't really find a lot of interesting background ideas, and I didn't want to leave it as one solid color, so I made a soft gradient, added some light accents, sparkles and things, and some floral accents, just for good measure, and that's Crow's illustration done. Not too challenging, just me kind of having fun really. So for Ray, like before, I didn't really want to put her in something too rich and elegant. I used Rapunzel as my main inspiration for the dress. I considered adding some frilly trim, but I didn't really like how it looked, so I went ahead and scrapped it. I didn't put any heels on Ray since I don't think that's something she would ever wear. I did try them though, just in case, but yeah, they just looked weird on her and they didn't really match the dress. Now, since I don't think there's been a princess with blue hair, I went ahead and changed it to brown to look a bit more natural. I think it helps with the design since it breaks up all the blue just a bit. I think my main challenge with this one was just the pose that I drew her in. For some reason, I've always sucked at drawing torsos twisting and bending, and most of my poses I've kept pretty stiff for this reason. But it's something I need to work on, so I figured I'd try it here. Now, is it just me, or does Ray look a little older here? After I finished it, she just looked older. I'm not sure what it is, if it's the body or the way I drew her face. The references I used did all have older women in them, so maybe that was it, and I subconsciously aged her a bit. If you know what it is, let me know, cause I can't figure it out. So going back to the drawing, I added in her freckles this time since, she doesn't need to look dead anymore. For some reason, freckles and the dead don't really seem to match up in my mind. Do dead people even have freckles? I need to look into this. Yay, more weird search history on my computer. Now her hair was a bit tricky. A lot of the shading was looking a bit off, so I did have to fumble around with it a bit. I'm used to her having really light hair, so normally the shading is pretty easy. But obviously for a darker and less saturated color, my methods may have to change a bit. Especially since she has more flowy hair. Is that a word? Flowy? I'm gonna say it's a word. But I needed to differentiate between the 2 main layers a bit. So, like Crow, I went ahead and added a bit of trim. This time I kept it less decorative than last time to go with the more simplistic theme I wanted. And again, for the background, I kept it pretty simple with just a 2-color gradient and some sparkles. Now for Ash. This is actually close to how some of her previous designs looked, minus the princess gown, of course. But for a long time, Ash had long flowing hair. It wasn't until about a year or so ago that I decided to chop it all off. While I do like her current design, it's nice to revisit some of the previous looks. So for Ash, I didn't really want to put her in some full skirt gown since most of Ash's clothing tends to be a bit on the tighter fitting side. So I used Aurora and Elsa as my main inspirations here, but I think that's pretty obvious when you look at the overall design. Aurora was actually my favorite princess growing up, so it was really fun to draw my favorite OC in a dress inspired by my favorite princess. I kept the same color that Aurora's dress has to still give Ash sort of that sharp and edgy look that she normally has. So like Gray, the bright blue hair didn't really seem to match the theme, so I darkened it to give it more of a raven black sort of shade, which isn't that far off from how she looks right now in the comic. The dress again, I kept pretty simple, but I did add in a few yellow accents just to mimic her main outfit. I don't think any princesses had asymmetric ribbons along the waist and hips of their dress, but I think it does a good job of breaking up all the dark blue. I really love how the dress came out, like it's elegant and pretty like the other princess gowns, but it reminds me of something a vampire would wear. A dark vampire princess. Get on that, Disney, I need to see that movie. I also went ahead and skipped Ash's normal heavy eyeshadow since I didn't want her to look too dark and depressing, but I kept the lipstick to still give her that romantic look. I did have to go back and forth on the hair a bit. I didn't want it to be too shiny, but I still wanted you to be able to see those individual pieces. I could have done the colored highlights like she has in the comic, but I thought that might look weird for this. Every time Disney does a dark-haired female, any highlights are usually white or brown or non-existent, so I tried to follow that theme. From there, I went ahead and shaded the dress. I wanted everything to be really shiny so it looked a lot more rich, like it was made of silk or something like that. I think I could have done a bit more work on the skirt. I thought about making it pleated, but I felt like that was too close to Aurora's dress, and I already did the slit thing with yesterday's design, so I just went ahead and left it alone. I also skipped the trim idea since I did the same thing on the last 2 drawings, and I think the yellow ribbons does a good enough job of breaking up all the blue. I really think I should have given her stockings, but what the heck. Ash is a rebel, she's not going to follow your rules of modesty. Now the background. I really don't like this one. For some reason, I didn't want to do the normal 2-tone gradient, and I wanted to try and frame her in more of a circular gradient, and I really don't think it came out very well. It took forever to try and center it to get it just right, and I couldn't get the colors to fade together very well, so it just kind of looks awkward. It kind of reminds me of those dress-up games, like how some of the backgrounds are really just bleh, but the dresses are all really well shaded and pretty looking. Who knows, maybe that's the look I was going for. Yeah, that's totally it. I meant to do that. So, like before, I added in the same sparkles and lighting to try and give it that magical look, because I was in denial about how the background looked and I was trying to save it. If I ever draw this again, I am scrapping that background. At the time I thought it was fine, but now I really wish I'd just redone the whole thing. But hey, they can't all be perfect. So that wraps it up for today's illustrations, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for Once Upon a Time. Bye for now.